Good evening, folks. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. This is a continuation of the Global War 1939 solo playtest, Round 7 summary. We are focused on Western Europe. Specifically, we are focused on Paris and Italy, Turin, Western Germany, because the Allies, with the Americans and the Canadians and the British, they have the Germans and the Italians on their heels. Just currently, in Bordeaux, the Americans have 20 infantry, 12 armor, and 2 fighters. The UK and the Canadians have a combined 13 infantry, 5 armor, and 4 fighters. And defending Paris is a lonely 17 ground units with a fortification. So the fortifications do help on the round 1 of combat, but the Allies now, the last round, I don't think they could have done it, maybe, but they wanted to have the sheer advantage in numbers. But the Allies have a decision to make. They don't have to go for Paris this round. They could, the British could do a can opener in Marseille and kill these 2 Italians down here, which would open the door for the Americans to come across and wipe out Turin, and the Italians could not stop it. The problem with that scenario is the Italians are still making 35 IPP, and they're going to build everything in Rome the following turn. And does that then spread the Allies too thin for a counterattack eventually from the Germans? So that is potentially the scenario there. So the Allies are going to have a decision to make. The Allies were quite worried about the Italian Navy coming through Gibraltar, so they did send a couple transports down here. So now they have 5 ground units and a fortification defending Gibraltar. And the Italians just did not think it was worth it to bring units from Italy over here, because they had to reinforce Cairo over here. So the Brits have come up, they've surrounded Cairo. There's currently a standoff defending half and half of British and Italian, German and Italian forces. 8 units for the British, Brazilians and Canadians. So, but do the Allies have the advantage because they built a heavy bomber, a Lancaster, down here in South Africa, and they could grab a couple more ground units and come up, but the Germans have the scramble with their veteran fighters. So is it worth it? So the Allies have to make a decision there. The Germans could reinforce with their veteran fighters next turn. When over here in the Atlantic, the Americans now do not have to build any more transports. They built 1 this turn. They could come across next turn with 8 infantry and another 8 armor. And the Canadians could bring across another 4 ground units next turn. And the British can reinforce with another 8 ground units over here. And the Germans have to be careful because the Allies could swing up over here and land potentially in Western Germany. So they did build some more ground units back in Berlin this turn. So, and the German Navy is now up here ready to head over here into the Atlantic. So the Russians and the British have backed up to Canada to see what the Germans are going to do. They were hoping to have some help from the Italians down here in the Med, but they are now blocked in. They tried to send a submarine through to kill these transports and a destroyer, but they lost. So not good for the Axis and the European theater. Over here on the Western Front, currently on the doorstep of Moscow, the Germans have 65 units, including their aircraft, that could hit Moscow next turn. However, the Russians are now building heavier attacking units, and they have 62 and a fortification. So that would be a no-win scenario for the Germans to attack. And up here, they played ping pong for Leningrad. And now the Russians have the numerical advantage between Karelia and Leningrad. They could start poking their way into Finland. And there's a 7-0 bonus for Finland. So the Russians are starting to think about going on the offense. However, they do not have the wherewithal yet to push the Russians or Germans away on the doorstep of Moscow yet. They have secured Leningrad with help of the British, thankfully, so that is probably safe. And the Russians also built over here in Novosibirsk at the factory. The Japanese came up into this territory here, and they sent, I think it was about 8 ground units, and they were wiped out by the Chinese, but the Japanese didn't care because they are trying to wither the Chinese forces down, and they are slowly making their way across. Over here in the Middle East, the Japanese are going up slowly. The Japanese now are into the CCP territories, and they have just a horde of infantry that are slowly walking across. They might think about building some fast movers just to finish the job off 100%. And the Russians now only have 3 ground units left on the Siberian flank. The Japanese continue to build navy and aircraft, and they've now divided their navy. So the Axis currently have 5 Axis victory cities in the Pacific and 5 in the Atlantic. They want to get to 12. So that's up to the Japanese, and the 2 they're trying to go after are Sydney and Hawaii. So this was the last chance for the Australians to get rich, so they fanned out. And thankfully, due to their Australian commandos and artillery, they were able to grab Borneo and Sumatra. So currently the Japanese need one more round to link up with their transports and build some more ground units, and they are going to maybe consolidate their transports with their ground units and head for Australia. So the Aussies know this is happening. They are now starting to build ground units here in Sydney. And then they built another infantry. In New Zealand, the British built a tank as well. And the Americans are now starting to also reinforce Hawaii. They have a transport that went back to Western USA. It's going to bring over a couple guys next turn. So that's happening there, folks. And the Japanese have the initiative in the Pacific. And the Americans, Canadians, and British have the initiative in the Atlantic. And this, folks, this is coming down to a game of attrition, a game of numbers, a game of math. Sometimes that happens. And you have to pay close attention to economies, to how many units you can bring across, how many units can get there and defend. And currently this is the Allies' best chance, and in the Pacific, Hawaii and Australia are the Japanese best chance. So stay tuned, folks, and thank you for watching.